So, hi, Monk George here.
Hello.
Hello. um, Greetings for the fourth lecture on this short teaching on the 8 verses of training the mind, composed by the great Tibetan Lama Langri Tangpa, and commented on, first of all, by Geshe Chekawa, who we mentioned before, is up in the merit field here of the Lama Chopa. So we have gone through the first 6 of the 8 verses. Today we're going to finish the last 2. And just as a reminder, all of these are methods to train the mind in the 2 bodhicittas, which means conventional bodhicitta, which is, as you undoubtedly know, means the altruistic intention to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And the other bodhicitta is what we call ultimate bodhicitta, highest bodhicitta. That is the understanding of emptiness within the mind stream of someone who has conventional bodhicitta, because it's focusing on the ultimate truth, so it's called ultimate bodhicitta. Even if a hearer or a solitary realizer, someone who practices the lesser vehicle path, has a realization of emptiness, their realization is not called ultimate bodhicitta because their mind stream is not held by conventional bodhicitta. They don't have the wish to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. Their main intention, their main wish is to leave cyclic existence. So just briefly, I'll recite the verses as I like to say them. You have before you Lama Zopa Rinpoche's translation, I think. Where do I have it here? Thought I had it right here. Oh, yeah, here we go. So, first verse, I like to say, rather than contemplating or thinking or resolved, I like to say responsible, feeling responsibility to achieve the greatest, to bring about the greatest benefit for all sentient beings who excel even the wish-fulfilling gem. I will always hold them most dear. So your translation there says, determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings. So I mentioned, I think I mentioned the line about more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel or gem could be referring to sentient beings or could be referring to bodhicitta itself. Some lamas even sort of give that interpretation of it, that we want to achieve the highest benefit, which is more precious than a wish-fulfilling gem for all sentient beings. In fact, the texts that I have all say for sentient beings. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is translated here from all sentient beings. He prefers that translation himself. Or at least the translators who worked with him prefer that. So as one of my teachers, Serkon Senshab Rinpoche, used to say, when you translate texts, the classical texts that have different interpretations in the different lineages, like say, the Nyingma or Sakya, Kargyu, Gelug, it's maybe best to translate the words in a way that is most flexible, that can be interpreted by all of the traditions in a way that they find suitable. So I like to say, responsible to obtain the greatest benefit for all sentient beings, excelling the wish-fulfilling gem, I will always hold them most dear. So excelling doesn't, it's a little bit ambiguous whether it refers to the benefit, the enlightenment that you're trying to obtain for sentient beings, or the sentient beings themselves, because sentient beings are more precious than a wish-fulfilling gem, in the sense that if you cultivate them, if you cherish them, like you take care of a wish-fulfilling gem and put it at the top of a pole, it can fulfill all your wishes. Then the second, second verse, wherever I am and whoever I am with, I will always consider myself the lowest of all, and from the depths of my heart, hold others, cherish others as supreme. Here it says, hold others dear and supreme. So we mentioned about that. One of the great obstacles at the beginning of practicing the Bodhisattva practices and the training of the mind is holding yourself higher than others. So when you make offerings to others, you should always do so respectfully, not as though you are, a lord or master and the others are your slave or something like that, that you're just giving them something. Thirdly, vigilant of my mind stream throughout all actions. Whenever afflictions arise endangering myself and others, I will confront and avert them without delay. That's the third verse. So here in Rinpoche's translation, in all my actions, I will examine, I examine my mental continuum, vigilant of my mind stream throughout all actions. And whenever delusions, afflictions arise that endanger myself and others, I will confront and avert them without delay. When I say without delay, that's perhaps in the translation here, at the minute they arise. So we talked about, this is a constant practice we should try to have all the time, of all the time looking within, rather than being so concerned about the appearance of this lifetime, watching your mind stream and watching when delusions arise, when afflictions arise, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, and so forth. And when they do, recognizing them, recognizing the harm that they cause others, when we speak harsh words or when we're too needy with others and so forth. We also recognizing the harm that they cause us in perpetuating those states of mind, and the negative karma that they create on our mind stream that prevent us from making realizations, that prevent us from helping others, that act as obstacles to our progress. We want to, to confront them and apply the antidotes, avert them through applying their antidotes, the temporal antidotes and their ultimate antidotes, which is the realization of emptiness. Then the fourth verse, whenever I see sentient beings of bad character, here it says wicked in nature, overwhelmed by suffering and obsessed with negative actions. The one word in the Tibetan that is used to apply to both of those words, nun tonse, at the time I see, whenever I see beings that are, and I like to say, overwhelmed by negative actions, you could say, or negativity, and obsessed with, I was overwhelmed by suffering and obsessed with negative actions. Even though there's one word that's modifying both of them, in a sense, I kind of see sometimes my own mind gets obsessed with negative actions, just like when we talk about obsession. I will hold such rare ones dear as if I had found a difficult, I shall hold them dear as if I'd found a precious treasure that is very difficult to acquire. So when we get a chance to meet people that are taxing to our patience, we should relish that opportunity, because when they're gone, we may even wish that we had their presence again, so that we could cultivate our minds in the practice of patience, which is at the beginning of the path is the greatest virtue, because anger and hatred and so forth is one of the greatest harms, eats up our positive karma. Then the fifth verse, I like to say it like this: I will practice to accept defeats, such as others mistreating me with abuse and insults and so forth, and I will offer the victory to them. I'd like to put it that way, because although the verse in Geshe Chekawa's commentary says it's mainly talking about the practice of patience, of not retaliating and even benefiting others in return, rather than retaliating with harm when someone harms us. Geshe Chekawa was initially interested in these 8 verses, which were written by Geshe Langri Tangpa, because of this verse, and he was kind of perplexed by, is it necessary to accept the defeat and give the victory to others? So I like to say, when it says, when out of envy others mistreat me with abuse, insults, or the like. In Tibetan, it says lasok or sok. That means that's just an example of the kind of things that can be mistreating me. I will accept the defeat and offer the victory to others. So this is one of the great practices, as I mentioned. Lama Zopa Rinpoche mentioned, once to me many, many years ago, decades ago. This was, for me, this was an important thing. Maybe I always wanted to win in the arguments or whatever, Then the 6th verse, when anyone I have benefited, in whom I have great hope, gives me great harm, I will try to see them as my holy teacher, as my spiritual friend. Here it says, my virtuous friend. So rather than seeing others as, someone that has harmed you in some way, recognizing that if you have benefited them, you might have some expectation in them in returning the benefit that you gave them, the help that you gave them, which is not the Bodhisattva's creed, not the mindset of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva doesn't engage in activities expecting something in return. I mentioned how when I was teacher many, many years ago in a school, one of the other teachers offered to help me with something, an older fellow, and he said, "Oh, don't worry." I said, "How can I, how can I repay you?" He said, "Don't worry, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine." Do you have that expression in Singapore? Kind of like, I'll help you if you help me back, with that kind of expectation. So if someone who you have benefited, and reasonably you have some expectation that they will help you, when instead of that they give you very unjustified harm, still that's the person you consider your guru, because they're giving you the opportunity to practice patience. So is that the 6th one? Yeah, I think so, right? So the 7th verse we're going to talk about today the translation you have in front of you there, in short, both directly and indirectly, I offer every happiness and, well, benefits. It shouldn't have an S in that translation. I offer every happiness and benefit to all my mother. Maybe the S goes on the mothers, and secretly take upon myself all their harms and sufferings. Yeah, and the translation I have, in short, both directly and indirectly, I offer every happiness and benefit to all my mothers. So the S of benefits should be on the mother, their mothers, and secretly take upon myself all their harms and suffering. So this is the verse that we're starting today. Oh, good, look at that. You could do it in real time. Wow. Oh, it didn't work out. Still, there we go. So the translation that Geshe Chekwa gave, the commentary that he gave that was translated by Thupten Jinpa, the translator of the Dalai Lama, says something like this: in brief, or in short, here we have in short, so in Tibetan it says Dorna. So this is kind of like a condensation of the conventional aspects of the mind, of how we train in bodhicitta. I will train myself, or I will. There's two different ways of, two different traditions of translating all these verses. Some of them end with the word lap, which means I'll train. Some of them end with the word shok, which means may I, I will. In short, I will train myself to offer benefit and joy to all my mothers, both directly and indirectly, and respectfully take upon myself all the hurts and pains of my mothers. So it's sounds a little bit different, but it's just a different way of translating essentially the same words, except one word is different in the Tibetan, and that is the word about either secretly or respectfully. There's two different words. And let me say how I usually think of this. In short, I will practice directly and indirectly to offer every happiness, to offer all benefit and happiness to all mothers. The word my is kind of implied here. It just says all mothers. And secretly or respectfully take on myself all their harms and sufferings, all their harms and sufferings. So for this verse, I've sought out the commentary by one of the famous lineage lamas, Ngultru Dharmabhadra. Maybe some of you who have studied some know Ngultru Dharmabhadra. Ngultru Dharmabhadra was maybe several hundred years ago. He was one of the lineage lamas of many different lineages, Lanrim and other things, but especially in the Vajrayogini, which I practiced some time ago. Ngultru Dharmabhadra wrote a commentary to Lama Chopa, which I'll be using in the coming weeks. After this course, we'll have a little course on the glance meditation at the end of Lama Chopa, the Guru Puja. So he wrote a commentary to that. He wrote a commentary to Bodhisattva Charyavatara, which His Holiness the Dalai Lama asked to be used. I think it was his, maybe not, maybe it was someone else, at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. But anyway, he wrote a commentary to the 8 verses of training the mind. So when we talk about the meaning of the words directly and indirectly, Lama Zopa used to translate this as, I will practice now and in the future continuum, sort of like the Tibetan word says ngodang gyupa yi, which means you could translate it most literally as directly and indirectly. That means I'm going to practice to try to bring about all these benefits for sentient beings now directly, like in actually providing help and aid and so forth, and directly taking upon, accepting the loss, as we said in one of the previous verses, when there's a situation of win or lose or something, to take the loss, offer the benefit, the victory to others. Now, and indirectly means can mean in the future, so that even if you can't help them immediately now, you make prayers and you do the Tonglen meditation, the meditation on taking on the suffering of others and giving them your happiness and virtues mentally. So that can mean indirectly, even though they may not recognize that you're doing anything for them right now. You may seem like even a patsy or something like that. They've won or they've hurt you or something like that, or they're suffering. You can imagine taking on their suffering, even if you don't have the ability right now to alleviate their suffering, or it's something that you're not ready to do, to take on that burden. You imagine in the future taking it on, indirectly taking it on. So imagine one way of doing it is to just visualize that suffering coming to you, or as one of the precepts of doing Tonglen meditation, the giving and taking meditation, imagine breathing in their suffering, their negativities, their obsessive states of mind, and their suffering, taking that in, breathing that in the form of black smoke that comes down to you can't see my heart chakra here, down to my heart chakra, where the seat of self-grasping and self-cherishing thought kind of resides. And then to send out, imagine that your body, your possessions, your wealth, the money that you have and so forth, and your body, say for instance, even your organs, imagine sending them out. Even the virtues that you have accumulated in the past are accumulating now, even the virtues that you will accumulate in the future. Imagine sending them out, dedicating them to sentient beings, not for your own happiness and welfare. That particular kind of state of mind, if you did sincerely, would be incredible imprint on the mind, purifying negative karma, creating so much virtue. It is one of the hallmarks of the mind training teachings in Tibetan Buddhism, this particular meditation on Tonglen. Even lamas teach it, maybe even just to leave an imprint in the mind about it, even before people understand the benefits of it or what the reason is. This is kind of talking about that when it says directly and indirectly. The directly means you don't only just do Tonglen, just imagine taking on their suffering and giving things, but you directly do it right now, actually. You give what you can. You try to take on the suffering of others, the problems, the loss, and so forth, and to offer the victory to others. But indirectly, when you can't do that, if it's something very global, like say the pandemic right now, imagine taking on all of the incredible sadness and worry in the minds of sentient beings. So many people's minds are distressed. Their bodies are in distress. Some of them from a Dharma point of view are more superficial. Their worries, such as just their wealth and so forth, being, right now in America, that's one of the things that the president is more concerned about the economy than the health of the population, it seems sometimes. But imagine taking on all that worry, all that suffering, the danger, taking it on oneself, and in so doing, imagine that our mothers, sentient beings, all of the sentient beings who have been our mother a number of us lifetimes in the past. That's why the word mother is used there, in the sense of feeling some heartwarming love toward them, affection toward them, taking on their suffering, just as a mother would for her child. Many stories that you hear about, well, I've heard, mother, she hears the son in the garage crying out for help, and she sees the car has fallen on him. He was trying to repair it underneath or something, and the support that held it up, the jack, whatever it's called, is fallen, and she even that she doesn't have the strength, she finds the strength somehow to help pull it up and save him. Or mothers wishing that they could take on the suffering of the fever or the sickness of their child, sometimes even saying that they committed the crime that their child committed out of affection for them. We imagine taking on all of the suffering of sentient beings. So in short, both directly, I'll practice directly and indirectly. So both directly helping and taking on suffering, and indirectly through the practice of Tonglen, offering every happiness, every in Tibetan, it has the benefit comes first. Every benefit and happiness to all sentient beings, to all mothers. It doesn't mean mother, only, you don't care about fathers or uncles or anything in the world, but it means your mothers, and to secretly take upon yourself all of their harms and sufferings. So what's the meaning of secretly here? I'd like to say the other translation from Geshe Chekawa's text that Thupten Jinpa translated, he says, respectfully take it upon myself rather than secretly. So in one sense, I think the secretly is already implied indirectly, that you're doing this indirectly through the practice of Tonglen, although it can be emphasized by the secretly. I like as it's already implied indirectly, I like the other version of the Tibetan text that says respectfully. That means really sincerely taking upon yourself all their harms and sufferings. Well, sincerely helping them also directly and indirectly. So this is kind of the condensation of all of the conventional, the first 6 verses, a way to practice that in short and brief through the practice of Tonglen. Tongwa in Tibetan is a word that means to give. Lempa means to take. These were teachings that I believe Atisha received from his guru in Indonesia, Serlingpa, who was also called Dharmakirti. His name, not the famous logician Dharmakirti, but his actual ordained name was Dharmakirti. Among all of when he stayed with him for some 13 years studying about the way to develop bodhicitta, these were some of the teachings that he received. So very, very, very precious. So I'll come back to that in a second. So in Geshe Chekawa's commentary, he quotes a line from the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the Shantideva's text, and the Bodhisattva's handbook, you might say. entering the way of the Bodhisattva. It says, my own happiness and other sufferings, if I do not thoroughly exchange them, I will not become fully enlightened. In this cyclic existence too, I'll find no joy. That's kind of one of the scriptural references in Shantideva for that. So then the last verse, there are different interpretations. Here we have Lama Zopa's translation. I'm not sure where the also comes from there. I'll practice also. I do not defile all these practices by the stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns, and by knowing all phenomena to be illusory, without trusting in them, I'm freed from bondage. Or as in the translation from Geshe Chekawa's commentary that Thupten Jinpa did, by ensuring that all this remains undefiled by the stains of the 8 mundane concerns, or as Rinpoche says, the 8 worldly concerns, or we say worldly dharmas, and by understanding all things as illusions, I will train myself to be free of the bondage of clinging. So this is one, in this, the way that both of these 2 translations are phrased, the first 2 lines are talking about still the conventional side of things. Not, making sure that none of these practices are defiled by the stains of the conceptions of the eight worldly concerns. Actually, it doesn't say worldly in here or mundane. The text actually says by stains of the 8 dharmas. So it's assumed in these 2 translations that the 8 dharmas means the 8 worldly dharmas. You know what the 8 worldly dharmas are? You must have heard many times, right? One of the attitudes that, well, what ordinary worldly people rely upon for happiness. Generally, dharma is that which supports you from suffering. So the worldly dharmas are those things that support you from suffering from the worldly point of view, like craving for happiness, happiness and avoiding suffering, wanting to have possessions, wanting to avoid losing possessions or wealth, wanting to hear sweet ego-pleasing words like "I love you." And we know that children, if they don't, a lot of research has come out over the years that children that are deprived of love and care when they're young are often, often turn out psychologically to have problems later. Wanting to hear sweet ego-pleasing words like "I love you," wanting to be free of any kind of blame, and wanting to be famous and wanting to be free of infamy, of widespread disapproval and so forth. Lama Thupten Geshe, my teacher, Lama Geshe, who was Lama Zopa's teacher and who guided the FPMT, had the inspiration to start this. He used to say that of all of the worldly dharmas, possessions, even happiness, comfort and so forth, and even fame and so forth could be, a lot of people didn't find that much trouble giving them up. But the one that was always difficult was that some group of people would consider you, even if not widespread, someone was your ally, someone loved you, someone liked you, your friends and so forth. That was one of the most difficult. So when your actions are compromised in a sense by mixing with the 8 worldly concerns, even if you give, almost looking around to make sure others see that you're giving, so that they'll praise you, hold you in high regard, or dedicating the wing of the hospital, giving money to the hospital, but not just giving it anonymously, having your name up there, the Monk George wing, having to have that up there. In so doing, your virtuous actions become defiled or stained. They're compromised in some way. None of these defiled by the stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns. So the word superstitions here is Rinpoche's way of saying, the Tibetan word is tokpa, which means conceptions. From the point of view of Ngultru Dharmabhadra and some other lamas, even the Dalai Lama said in 1981 in a teaching in Bodh Gaya on the 8 verses, which I was able to find on one of the FPMT, Lama Yeshe's wisdom archives, I think. His Holiness said, he said, I think I can explain this, the first 2 lines here from the point of view of ultimate truth, not just conventional truth, so that the actions are not defiled by the 8 worldly dharmas. Rather, and as the commentary of Ngultru Dharmabhadra says explicitly, he doesn't even mention the 8 worldly dharmas, because here it just says, Chuge ki tokpa. So the conceptions of the 8 dharmas, or the 8 phenomena, or the 8 factors. So what are referred here are the 8 proliferations, or the 8 elaborations of mind that Nagarjuna mentioned in his prelude to the Fundamental Wisdom, his great text that was the basis for all of the understanding of emptiness, Sawishara, Mula Prajna. His Holiness over the years has taught this text more and more, the root text. So in the opening of that, which is very, very profound, and when one studies Madhyamaka at Sera and other places, even a long period of time is spent on just this prelude or opening verses. So I'll use a translation here of that verse from Jeffrey Hopkins' Meditation on Emptiness, if you happen to have that, page 162. I bow down to the perfect Buddha, the best of propounders, who taught that what dependently arises has no cessation, no production. Those are 2 things: cessation, production, no annihilation, no permanence, no coming, no going, no difference, no sameness, and is free from the elaborations of inherent existence and of duality, and is at peace. So whatever is dependently arising, so that all phenomena, everything that exists, and even everything that doesn't exist, is a dependent arising. It arises in dependence and causes and conditions, those things that are impermanent, and even those things that are permanent, such as shunyata itself, many, many other permanent phenomena like uncompounded space and so forth. All of them are dependent on their parts. So everything is, has a conventional existence in terms of its depending upon a consciousness that observes something, a basis of imputation, and the name that's given, the imputation that's given by the mind. So Ngultru Dharmabhadra, in his commentary, and His Holiness, when he taught in Bodh Gaya many years ago, said that this is a legitimate way to interpret these verses. When it talks about dharmas, it doesn't necessarily mean the 8 mundane dharmas. In fact, Ngultru Dharmabhadra's commentary, there's anyone's any Tibetan student there is interested, I could send you a file, or if you request the center, they can ask me, I'll send the file to them, they can send you. It's very short. So here it's talking about not defiled by these 8 proliferations of the mind, that you hold things to be inherently ceased or inherently produced. Usually when you study Madhyamaka philosophy, the middle way philosophy, we talk about phenomena are unborn or not inherently produced. That's one of the main arguments that that Nagarjuna used at the beginning of the fundamental wisdom. So they don't have inherently existent cessation nor inherently existent production. There is no annihilation nor, you could say, permanence. This can refer to, for instance, one of the wrong views that many people ask the Buddha: when the Tathagata dies, when the Sugata passes away, meaning the Buddha, does he disappear completely? Is he just gone? Like worldly people think when you die, you're no longer, atheists, let's say, some religious people, usually Christians and others, believe that something exists continually, right? Your soul or something. But some people think when you die, you just die. There's nothing. Or is it that the Buddha exists eternally, permanently? It's kind of like the religious point of view. So the Buddha had said neither of these. He didn't comment on these various views that people had, and some people said, "Oh, he didn't know, what the answer was," or whatever. It's not that. It's that it has to be qualified. There's no inherently, the Buddha doesn't inherently cease. He conventionally ceases this lifetime, but he doesn't inherently exist permanently afterwards. He's just imputed upon the continuity of mind and so forth. So there's no cessation, production, annihilation, permanence, no coming or going. So when you talk about processes, even, one of the chapters, I think, was it the second chapter in the Fundamental Wisdom, talks about coming and going. Going and coming, neither of them have inherent existence. They're just names that we apply to a process that's taking place. I won't go into the reasonings of that. And there's no difference, no sameness. So when we talk about the the person, the conventionally existent person, let's say Chan Hao, or who is up there, Chen Ye. Oh, Chen Ye is here. When we talk about a person, the conventionally existent person, is the person the same as the aggregates that make up the person, the 5 aggregates? Or is it different than the aggregates? Well, it's neither, because it's not inherently one with the aggregates, it's not inherently different than the aggregates. So that's one way of understanding these 8 proliferations or elaborations of the mind. So in this sense, this whole 8th verse is talking about emptiness, is talking about first in equipoise, because in Multru Dhamarbhadra's commentary, he says, the middle way, so what one should, where was this word? You should meditate, you should equipoise on the non-inherent existence, a non-inherent existence, the Madhyama, the middle way, devoid of the extremes, unstained, unpolluted by the stains of conceptions that hold phenomena as inherently produced or ceased, permanent or annihilated, coming and going, the same or different. So this is talking about the meditative equipoise on emptiness, when you have a correct intellectual and eventually a direct realization of emptiness in meditation. The reason why this to me seems more reasonable, and other lamas have said also, interpretation of the 8 dharmas here, rather than talking about the 8 worldly dharmas, is because the second 2 lines says, and by understanding all things, all phenomena as illusory, I will train myself to be free of the bondage of clinging, or I will, without clinging, I'll be freed from bondage. Here, Lama Zopa's translation said, without trusting them, trusting in them. The Tibetan word Shenpa is used in the Prajnaparamita Sutras to refer to a particular very strong apprehension of the mind that's holding things to be inherently existent. So the second 2 lines is talking about the post-meditation, meditation on emptiness. The first 2 lines from this interpretation, the Dalai Lama has mentioned in the past, and as I mentioned, the commentary by Muntu Dharmabhadra says, the first 2 lines is talking about the meditation on emptiness, the equipoise, space-like meditation on emptiness, we might say. And the second 2 lines are talking about the illusory-like meditation, seeing them as illusory, or what's another word? As illusions, right? Yuma. So how does one practice, from this point of view, the first 7 verses are all talking about conventional bodhicitta, how to develop the heart, the wish to authentically, altruistically aim for the goal of your self-attaining enlightenment for the benefit of other sentient beings. To actually affect that, you have to have the ultimate bodhicitta, the realization of emptiness, eventually the direct realization of emptiness. And that has 2 parts. First, the direct meditation, equipoise on emptiness, which is called space-like meditation. Only thing that appears to your mind is a mere vacuity. Having analyzed, say, the self, recognizing that the self doesn't exist. If it existed at all, it would have to be identical to the aggregates or different than the aggregates. Those of you who studied Madhyamaka have heard that argument before. And to see that it is not inherently one with the aggregates, because there are many aggregates, in which case there would be many selves for one reason. There are many different arguments that can be used. And it's not inherently different than the aggregates, because if it was inherently different, ultimately different than the aggregates, if you were bitten by a bee, or you hit your thumb with a hammer, or whatever, you wouldn't think, I have been hurt, because if the self was inherently different than the aggregates. So you have when you realize that self that you have been fixated on, it's another way of translating Shenpa, fixated. You've believed something, you've believed something to be true, which is not really true. When you realize that which you have believed up till now doesn't exist at all, you are left in a state in which you're no longer fixating on that. You're just apprehending, realizing the total non-existence of that, which is just like an empty space. It's called space-like meditation on emptiness. I'd mentioned in some of the courses at ABC before, one of my experiences when I was at Deer Park in America, at the monastery of Geshe Sopa, who was Lama Yeshe's guru and Lama Sopa's guru, my guru. And late at night, I would sometimes go out to say final prayers on the road in front of the monastery. There was a dog that had been, would chase cars, always barking at everyone, and its back legs had been run over by cars. So it would, if you got near his house there, he would chase you, but he would be dragging his, or she, I'm not sure if it was he or she, would be dragging their legs behind them, barking at you. And when he would bark, when I was walking down the road, I was saying my mantras, and I would hear over there somewhere, he would bark over here, and then I would hear another bark over there and another bark over there, as though somewhere over some other farm over there. And I thought, oh, it's interesting. The dogs always bark in the same way. He barks and then they bark. And it says all the time. And then it dawned on me, there were no dogs over there at all. Those were, what I was hearing were echoes. One of the classic examples that are used to bring about an understanding of emptiness, that all phenomena are like illusions, like the appearance of the moon in a lake, like a dream, that seems so real at the time, like an echo that's, you think, oh, there's really something over there causing that, some being over there saying that. So at that point, when I had sort of like shock at that point, there's no dog over there at all. It's not as though I was still fixating on dog. It was just what my mind was apprehending then was just the total absence of dog. And at that point, dog doesn't appear to the mind. It's not as, it's impelled by that understanding that there's no dog there, but you're no longer thinking. There's no image of dog or anything, just vacuity. So space-like meditation on emptiness. And then when you arise from that and things again appear to the mind, like say, if you meditate on the emptiness of the self, when you arise from that meditation, the self again appears. Even though you've understood it doesn't exist, it still looks like it's existing. By the force of your understanding of the emptiness, you recognize it as like an illusion. If any of you have had some little insight into, if you've had some experience of meditating on the emptiness of the self, when you arise from that and you have, oh my gosh, something like, it's so funny, which I've just understood doesn't exist at all, is still appearing as though it's real. That's called the illusion-like meditation on emptiness. The two parts of meditation on emptiness. One in equipoise, space-like meditation on emptiness, the first two verses, undefiled by the stains of the eight, of conceptions of the eight dharmas, the eight factors that Nagarjuna talked about in the beginning of the Fundamental Wisdom. And by understanding all things as illusion in the post-meditation, I will train to be free from the bondage of clinging. I will achieve enlightenment by no longer having this, again, this word that's used, shenmei chingwa ledro lab. I will train to be freed from the bondage from bondage. I will achieve liberation and enlightenment without clinging, without fixating on things as truly existent. So if you recite these verses, you can, maybe the first two lines, you can think they have two divisions. One division is that The conventional level, you talk about none of these actions defiled by the conceptions of the 8 worldly concerns, 8 worldly dharmas, even though the word worldly doesn't appear in the text itself. And on the ultimate level, you can think of the practice as meaning with none of these practices defiled by stains of the conception of the 8 proliferations of the mind, the 8 dharmas that Nagarjuna referred to in the beginning of the Fundamental Wisdom, which is talking about meditative equipoise on emptiness. And the second 2 lines talking about the post-meditation. When you arise from meditative equipoise, seeing all phenomena as illusions. His Holiness is mentioned also, even when he didn't talk about the first 2 lines meaning even if he explained it in terms of the 8 worldly dharmas, he would say sometimes the second set of 2 lines. He said it was kind of funny that it's only talking about the post-meditation, because usually we talk about the 2 things, meditative equipoise and post-meditation. So as you have the opportunity to go over these, if you memorize them and you may reformulate them in ways, make sure if you do so, you know a little bit of Tibetan to make sure that you've got all the words there, that you've not missed any words or not added anything that's not really there. Like in a sense here, the word worldly worldly concerns, that's not in the text. That's something that the translator has added as kind of their own commentary. If you memorize them and recite them every day, they kind of encompass the whole practice of training the mind. With none of these actions defiled by stains of the 8 dharmas, and by seeing all phenomena as illusory, may I be freed from the bonds of clinging. Okay, so that covers the 8 verses. I was told last time to remind you that there'll be some announcement after this, but I myself would just mention that I believe we will be starting 8 classes on the Lan Rim starting next week, I believe. Maybe the members of the center will correct me if that's wrong. And there will be 1 break in the middle. After 4 classes, there will be a break for 1 week when His Holiness will be giving some live teachings, so as not to interfere with that. So that will go through July and August. And yeah, if you have a chance, I have, as I mentioned at the beginning, I received this teaching for the first time from Lama Sopa Rinpoche at Kopan in 1974, right after he gave the Avalokiteshvara initiation. And so there are many ways of practicing this. At the end of saying each verse, imagining either Amitabha or Avalokiteshvara, making requests to them for you to be able to practice this way, and that nectar comes and takes away the obstacles and brings the realizations of them. Many different ways of doing that with regard to various deities. So if you can, on the basis of this, feel empowered to practice, that it would be very good. I wonder, in the few minutes that we have, if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask. Don't have an awful lot of time, but anyone have anything they'd like to say? I'm not sure how it works. I think you have to.
Hi, I've tried to unmute Vicky. Vicky, you can unmute yourself. Yes.
Good evening, Venerable.
Good evening. Who's that?
This is Ida.
Hi, Ida.
Hi, I thank you very much for this period of time. We are very new to all these teachings, and I'm listening with interest on this Tonglen practice now. I'm not too comfortable with that on undertaking the sufferings of others, and well, it's just basic superstition on my side, but nevertheless, I will endeavor to try that practice. But my question is, how does the action or the practice of Tonglen relate to emptiness? Because at the same time, we've got to also try and look at things where it's not from its own side, right?
Right. Not existing from their own side, not inherently or truly existing, right?
Right. So how does one practice Tonglen and still apply the emptiness of it?
Well, the Tonglen practice is from the point of view of what you might say post-meditation. So it's not necessary to do Tonglen to have an understanding of emptiness, although it makes it easier. And again, just as the way that you phrased the question at the beginning about being hesitant to take on suffering. So the whole point of the Bodhisattva's practice is to be reasonable. When we are not in a position yet, when we're still clinging to the existence of our own identity and our own possessions and everything, we're just a beginner on the path like we all are, it may not be the time to be able to take on the suffering of others directly, to take on their suffering or to give everything of ourselves, to give our body. It's not the time to give our body like the Buddha himself, when he was a bodhisattva, gave his body to the tigress who was dying of hunger and was not able to feed her little pups. Is that the right word for baby tigers or baby lions? Pups, I'm not sure.
Cubs.
The Buddha, as a bodhisattva, actually cut his arms so she could drink some blood first, so she got enough strength back, and he actually impaled himself on the ground, jumped off a cliff in front of her so that she could devour his body when she had a little more strength from his blood. We can't do that now. Like Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, at the beginning, the Bhagawan, the Buddha, taught us to give vegetables and so forth, simple things, food or clothing to others. And eventually, we will have the courage, the ability, when we're a bodhisattva, to be able to give even our own body and everything to others. So it's not something that we do now. So the beauty of Tonglen is that you can do it to strengthen your mind in imagination. Imagine having cherished others, and out of a sense of love for them, of affection for them, taking on all their sufferings as though they're your mothers. And imagine taking that onto your self-cherishing thought at your heart in the form of black smoke, breathing that in. Eroding, maybe breathing in again and again like that. Of course, you breathe out each time. Breathing in again and again, taking on their suffering. And at a certain point, when you feel that the hesitancy, when the self-cherishing thought is a little bit diminished, imagine sending out your possessions, your body, your organs, organ donor, you could give your kidney or part of your liver or whatever, your possessions, your merits of the 3 times to others in the form of white light coming out from your heart out your nostril out to others. So when it says directly and indirectly, as Buddhists, we try to be kind. So directly, if someone said, "Oh, you're wrong, you're stupid," we say, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry." We can accept the defeat on a simple level. When it gets really charged with our ego, when someone's a friend or what's the word? not enemy, but someone who's, a competitor or something like that, we might feel we can't take that. But we try our best directly and indirectly through the practice of Tonglen to take on their suffering and to give all of our happiness and virtues to others. So with an understanding of emptiness, that can augment that practice, because we know that ultimately we can overcome the self-grasping, the belief in a inherently existent, self-existent, truly existent self. And that in so doing, when we realize that, we will no longer be hindered by the clinging to this body and so forth. We will actually be able to work for the benefit of others. So doing the Tonglen can help to accumulate the merit that will allow you to realize emptiness. And what little meditation we do on emptiness, if we can have some kind of understanding of that, study of that, and meditative experience of that, that can help us to have the courage to do the Tonglen meditation. So they help one another. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yes, very much. Thank you very much, Venerable.
Okay. Anyone else have a?
Yeah, next will be Michael. Hold on, yeah.
Hey, Michael. Hey, Michael, I see your picture even. Oh, no, that's Mikhail.
Mikhail.
Is that who's? It looks like there's some dark mountains behind you.
Oh, good evening, Venerable George.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have enough merits to understand emptiness. So my
Me
kind
either. Okay.
yeah, my kind request to you: can you send a list of books to help me? Because it's easy to read and listen and understand the concept, right? So
Yeah.
can you send some of the book you recommend to read? To yeah.
Okay. I think many of the students at the center, because they have studied with Ken Rinpoche, Geshe Chuni, for a long time, they've studied the subject of emptiness. They can make some recommendations. If you go to the bookstore at ABC, they definitely have several of the good books. One in particular I found very useful is by Genlan Rinpa. Genlan Rinpa was not a geshe, he was a great meditator. He wrote a book on how to develop single-pointed concentration and another on emptiness. Very short, slim books. And that's a good companion to whatever else is recommended at the bookstore or by the other students at ABC.
Okay.
Okay.
Genme Ripla, right?
Lam Rimpa, like the subject Lam Rim, the stages of the path. The word Gen means is kind of an honorific for teacher. So
Okay.
Gen Lam Rimpa.
Yep.
I'm sure at the bookstore or whoever is listening to this who has a chance to go in the bookstore, you say, oh, if Mikhail comes in, what George had said was Genlan Rinpa's book on realizing emptiness.
Thank you very much.
So they may know.
Yeah.
So anyone else have something?
Yes, next will be Wong So Beck. Oh, I'll meet her. Yes.
Who is this?
Wong So Beck.
Wong So Beck. Okay.
Okay, yeah, Venerable, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, it's about being abused, abusive behavior. What is the when you say you have to offer victory to others and accept defeat, but the thing is, the more you do so, the more abusive the behavior becomes. So how do you handle that?
Yeah. So if your partner, you just always say, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, then they might get and energized. So in that case, what it's talking about when it's not talking about that you have to put up with abuse, but from your point of view, your mental point of view. Say, for instance, it's not something that we can necessarily all practice right now, but we can aspire to that. We can try to accept the defeat graciously when we can. Right now, if certain things that we feel that we might be enabling someone who is of an abusive personality, we don't want to empower them into that, but to diffuse a situation, to accept the defeat. I mentioned when I visited ABC in the past, one incident in India. One lady who I knew from the Netherlands, who when I was in the Netherlands giving some talks, she had acted as kind of like the person who brought me food and drove me around, so I knew her. Later, she became one of the companions of Sogyal Rinpoche. She's a very attractive young lady. And she told me a story once when she was in Dharamsala in McLeodganj. She was walking down from McLeodganj down to the library over the backside. Those of you who've been there might know what I mean. It's sort of like through the forests. And she was accosted by, I think, a couple of Indians who both, I think, stole her purse, but also tried to physically abuse her, sexually. And she was she was a very strong girl, young lady, and she was able to escape, and she ran down, and she saw later Khyentse Trijang Rinpoche, who was the junior tutor to the Dalai Lama, one of the great gurus of all of our gurus, Trijang Rinpoche. And she went to him and asked him, what should she do? Should she go to the police, or how should she feel about this? And Rinpoche gave some advice that she found that other people found very difficult to hear, but I think she said she profited very much. He said, rather than seeking retribution, you should actually pray that they not only aren't they punished now, but that they don't even have to experience the karmic results of this in the future. Now, some people would say, "Oh, that doesn't make sense because as they might do this to someone else, they should be, our culture believes that punishment is a deterrent to others and a deterrent to those people, so that they don't do that same kind of activity again in the future." But talking about your own spiritual development, to recognize this as the result of our past negative karma, and to wish that the other individuals not experience anything suffering now, or even the karma would be purified of this. So that's something that some people find it absolutely impossible to envision, practicing in that way. But that's what the bodhisattvas would endeavor to do. If you read some of the life stories of the Buddha, when he was a bodhisattva on the path, many times he was abused by others, taken advantage of by others, and he would inevitably accept that. This is this is like high-level bodhisattva about to become Buddha, right? It's something that we can practice to a certain degree now, and we can practice more and more as time goes on, but we shouldn't feel that we're supposed to accept every single defeat right now. if you're not able to, to do these practices, to do it in imagination, to imagine taking on the suffering in Tonglen and sending out, your virtues to others so that their minds can change. In so doing, you create the karmic connection with them that in the future, indirectly, you'll be able to help them by praying that, when I meet them again in the future, may I be able to give them the nectar of the Dharma. I don't know if that helps at all. Maybe.
Yeah, it does. Okay. Thank you very much, Venerable. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So maybe time for one more. Anyone else?
Yes, there's a participant, Cindy. Cindy, I will try to unmute you.
Hi, Cindy.
Yep, Cindy.
Hi, Venerable George and
Cindy.
all.
Hi,
Can
Cindy.
you hear me? Hi.
I can hear you. Yeah. Amazing. I'm in North Carolina, and I can hear you. You're in Singapore, right? Almost instantaneous. It's amazing. Right? Even in the old days, in long distance phone calls from India, you'd have to wait a couple seconds to talk to someone in the United States. Now you're talking from Singapore to me, and it's instantaneous. That's amazing.
That's right. Thanks to all the technology.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how this question is related to your topic, but it's a question always in my mind. If one loses one's mind,
If one what?
Loses the mind. That means to say, for example,
Goes crazy.
Suffering from brain imbalance where it affects the mind, not thinking rationally to people. So whatever that person does that person actually accumulate karma, as the person's motivations may not be a mindful motivation. So I'm just wondering, during the period, would a person accumulate karma, whether it's negative or positive? Because we always say karma associates with our motivations, right? But this person is not mindful. So how it affects the karma? Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I think still create karma, but actually, if you were to consider someone who thought about the negative deed, like say punching someone in the face, say someone who's hospitalized and they're just really deranged, and someone tries to come up and help them or whatever, and they punch them in the face, they create some negative karma. But the person who consciously plans this and with great anger strikes out, they create much more negative karma. It's not as though the person who has lost a lot of control of their mind or their actions doesn't create any karma at all. Like say, for instance, also, although this is not exactly what you're saying, sometimes people say, oh, but lions and other tigers and wild animals who hunt other animals and kill them for their food, they don't create any negative karma, do they? Because they couldn't live without killing these other animals. If you gave the lion, classic example, if you put a big bale of hay or fresh grass before the lion, they would just sit there totally uninterested, because they probably can't even, their body can't assimilate that. But the fact is that they still create negative karma, and that's one of the great disadvantages of being born in the animal realm and the lower realms, because sometimes you feel you have no choice. It's not just that you feel you have no choice. It seems like you have no choice in order to live, that you create negative actions. The examples in the Jataka tales when the Buddha was born as animals, though he himself would be an example to the other animals by not harming others, even if his life was imperiled and so forth. So I think, individuals who have lost control of their mind, they still create negative karma, but they don't have that added factor that makes the karma heavier by them planning it and carrying it out and, motivated with great anger and so forth. I hope that helps a little.
Thank you. Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So is there someone else that has a question?
I think Michael has posted something on the chat. Okay. Okay, maybe I will unmute him. Maybe he can speak on the and then explain. Wait.
Michael has a
Yeah.
follow-up, like in the news conference where they say, I have a
Yeah.
follow-up question.
Okay, Michael.
But this question was already answered, so I don't have more questions right now. Maybe
Oh,
after
okay.
reading.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay,
for
so, yeah, what?
Oh, remember, you can carry on. Yeah.
So in the coming weeks, we'll be doing something like this also on Saturday mornings there. It's Friday night here in the States at the same time, I believe. And we may have a little more time. Maybe we'll do the classes an hour and a half, but I think that's up to discussion with you folks. If you feel that's too long a time, we may do a little meditation when we talk about the meditations on the stages of the path. So let's end here, but please remain on. I think the staff of the ABC has some announcements to make maybe about that course and other things. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Venerable George.
Oh, my pleasure. I will disappear now and finish up my own prayers. It's late at night here. And enjoy your weekend and be safe.
Thank you very much.